Okay, so it's a very enticing prospect to work on multiple writing projects at once. It's a lot faster, you get it done, you get everything written much faster than you would do normally, and sometimes it's just best to move on to other things if you get writer's block on one certain aspect. But is this always a good idea? I would argue no. A lot of the time, it's very much not a good idea to work on multiple writing projects at once. Granted, this is subject to change and it depends on the person, but for me personally, working on multiple writing projects at once is very draining and very hard to do. And as someone who likes scheduling their writing, I personally write at the same time every day and have made a schedule around that and have been sticking to that schedule since I was about 15, so 6 years now ish, roughly. It's not an easy thing for me to write multiple projects at the same time because I would always try scheduling each thing. For a certain day of the week I'd work on one thing, another day I'd work on something else. This didn't really work because some days I just wasn't feeling it about writing whichever project I was supposed to be working on. Usually this involved it being the side project, and I'd just end up working on the main project, meaning that the side project just got chucked to the wayside and I did it at the last minute to when I was supposed to write it. Now, the other thing that's taught me about why I personally do not do this well, is last year, 2019. Because in 2019, I was working on 3 writing projects at one specific time. And oh boy, I'm gotta tell you, don't do that. Seriously, don't work on. I would never, ever, ever recommend working on more than 2 writing projects at once. Because 2 is feasible, it's manageable. Because then you can switch between the 2, like I said earlier, as and when you feel like it. When you get writer's block on one, you can be like, oh, okay, fine, I'll just work on the other one. When you have 3, when you get writer's block on one of them, you have to make a choice of which of the other 2 you want to do. And then that makes everything prioritized, and it messes up your brain because you're like, well, which one is more of a priority? Do I actually know which one is more of a priority? Do I need to make this up on the fly, which one is a priority? And there's also the risk of getting too overloaded with work and getting writer's block on all 3 projects. I've had this in some small part because last year I was working on Buried and Thanatos, which are out now. Buried being the novella I wrote last year, and Thanatos being the anthology I wrote last year, and the third one being a screenplay that I have written. I have not released yet for whatever reason. I just don't really feel like releasing it at the moment. But they're all finished now, but I had to focus on each one individually in order to do it, to get them all done. But it really depends on how your brain works, I guess. For me, personally, my brain likes working on one thing at a time. I don't like chopping and changing and going from being halfway through one thing and then moving over to the next thing. I've always been I'm going to do this, I'm going to finish this, then I'm going to do this next thing. Which is how I'm able to write and release books every year-ish. Currently, anyway. But working on multiple projects at once, I've got to tell you, 2019 was not a good year for me in terms of writing. I don't mean that in terms of the content. I mean that in terms of what I actually did. It was so draining. And it made me kind of not like writing anymore for a little bit of time. I like writing now, again, but for some time I just didn't like doing it, and I just wanted to stop. And even taking breaks didn't help, because I'd come back to it after a week and I'd be like, oh, for God's sake, I've got to write again now. And that's not a way that I've ever wanted to feel about writing, or a way I even thought I'd ever feel about writing. So my own consensus for this, I guess, sorry if this has got a bit rambly, would be to, if you want to work on multiple projects at once, by all means, do. But just be aware that it can be very draining and taxing on your time. It can be very hard to prioritize which stories you want to do and get done, which ones you need to get done faster, for example, and which ones you take less of a priority. You need to do that if you're going to do this. And also, yeah, just don't. My recommendation is pick up 2 and switch between the 2 when you feel like it. If you have to work, if you're one of those people that wants to work on multiple projects, only pick 2. If you pick more than 2, you are making a lot of pain for yourself, and it will not be fun for you, and you might even consider quitting writing. Well, I did anyway. I don't know about you, because everyone's different. But that's just my take on writing multiple projects at the same time. Like I said before, it's just my opinion. I'm very much a person who focuses on writing one thing at a time. So even if I'm working on one project that doesn't really take priority, and then I want to start the next one, I just completely pause the other one, and then come back to it at a later time when I can. That's just the way I work personally. And now let's look through some other writers' opinions from the writing community on Twitter about this topic, because I asked them what they thought about whether you should work on multiple writing projects at once, and I got a response. So @WaffleBoy says, it can work for some people, but others feel like they're always abandoning a project that they'll never get back to. And yeah, I agree with that. That's the abandoning project thing. That's how I feel about it whenever I do it, which is why I don't want to do it. @MBA_Caro replied, working on these 2 projects once helps my creativity. Whenever I'm blocked on one, I switch to the other. Fresh ideas are usually, but not always, the result. So yeah, it's a good take to have for this, because I agree with that. And when I was working on 2 projects at once, because I wasn't working on 3 for the entirety of 2019, I was working on 2 for a lot of it. That was very good. That was a very good thing to do. @AlexM Withrow wrote, I don't have an opinion, but I was literally wondering the same thing about 5 minutes ago. I have 2 stories going on in my head, but wasn't sure if I should focus on one or both. Well, Alex, I would say if you're one of those people that can focus on multiple projects at once, if you're one of those people that feels like you can get writer's block a lot, if you feel like you get writer's block a lot about certain project, about working, then by all means work on both of them at the same time. But if you feel like you wouldn't get writer's block so much, and you feel like you'd be abandoning each project every time you worked on a different one, then just work on one of them. Or just try both. Try working on both of them to start, and if you don't want to, then you can decide to work on one at a time. So it's all a learning experience from what I understand about writing. And finally, @Bisola285 says, I'm working on 2 projects right now. My novella, which I'm writing queries for, and a collection of short stories. My main focus is on the novella, but on the days I get stuck, I just move on to my short stories. Usually one of them works. And yeah, this is what I did, actually, for when I was working on Buried and Thanatos at the same time. I'd usually work on Buried, but if I got a writer's block, I wanted to get a short story out for the next week on my website, I'd just be like, okay, fine. I'll write my short stories now. And yeah, that's just mine and a few other writers' take on whether you should work on multiple projects at the same time, or just focus on one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. If you didn't like it, please feel free to dislike, so I can improve this channel's format, because at the moment it's very me in front of a camera. But if you'd like for me to do different things for my channel, please let me know. And thanks for watching, and ride on.